Hirohiko Araki had been publishing JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for roughly 5 years by the time Part 3 had reached its final act. His manga was an adventure battle series that focused on how a family was cursed by a vampire and how they tragically attempt to overcome this negative influence. That is a simple door explanation for JoJo's Part 1 through 3. But the popularity and acclaim that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as a whole receives is revisionist history in every single sense of the word. The manga was almost always in the bottom of TOC, and even during this iconic arc, it would barely crack the middle rankings without a color lead. So if JoJo was a cult indie darling throughout the 80s, what caused it to have such staying power all these decades later? That has to be attributed to Araki's abilities as a writer. Stardust Crusaders, the third installment of JJBA, stars Jotaro Kujo, the prototypical late 80s shonen lead. Similar in physique to his grandfather and ancestor, the protags of the previous sagas, this was the first JoJo to not only have a significant Japanese cast, but the first act takes place in Japan. The setup for Stardust Crusaders shows a lot of thought and consideration for how the characters would not only look, but how they would engage with one another. Stans replaced Haman, the machismo remained, but the camp was oozing from every single panel. It was as if Araki had become acutely aware of everything in the 80s that had become so hype, so ridiculous. So he leaned into it even more, but for camp purposes. While musical references are still about, mysticism is a big part of Stardust Crusaders. The adventure is also a lot more aimless, feeling more like a road trip movie than an extraction or revenge vibe of the previous arcs. The goofiness of Part 3 can sometimes put people off with what you could consider filler and needless retconning, but all of the growing pains are worth it when we finally get to the climactic battle. Our main group has experienced loss along the way. Kakian is blind. Avdol and Iggy were picked off with ease, and they're definitely suffering in hell. Polnareff is maimed and basically of no use against the final boss. He notices Dio at the top of a staircase after his devastating battle against Vanilla Ice. Araki uses a very clever method of revealing Dio's stand power. JP is a comical character, but he gets his wits together and figures out clues to what Dio can do. As he relays this information to Joseph and Jotaro, Kakion confronts Dio in a battle that has always stood out to me. Araki had already killed many characters up to this point, but after faking the deaths of several leads throughout Part 3, he firmly commits to their demise. Kakian never stood a chance against Dio, but by using his final Emerald Splash, he's able to leave a clue behind for the rest of the group to determine that Dio has the ability to stop time. This is the first time that Araki is able to perfectly execute on a good character's death. Previous sacrifices all felt very hateful, done for shock value in a series that never gave the audience enough time to really get attached to the character. Zeppelins are meant to die. Joestars will always suffer. It is what it is. But with Kakian's sacrifice and his final thoughts drifting to his family, you're reminded that these characters are just kids. They have families back home, and whatever their duty and obligation is on the road, they're still real people. Joseph and Jotaro don't let the sacrifices of their friends go to vain, and they engage Dio in direct combat. Araki illustrates the battle between the Joestars so perfectly. While Dio may not be a criminal mastermind, he is absolutely evil. His resourcefulness and quick thinking makes for many interesting panels. Dio's use of cutlery, road rollers, animal carcass, and of course, knives to create distance between him and Jotaro is stunning. Dio feels sinister at every moment, and the final confrontation between him and Jotaro doesn't involve brain trickery or traps within traps. Jotaro is pushed to his breaking point, having to keep his cool at all times, while also learning to awaken the power within himself to match Dio. Any average writer would figure out a unique way for the hero to overcome the stronger villain, but Araki is much better than your average writer. Jotaro soon realizes that even with his understanding of Dio's The World abilities and the awakening of Star Platinum's own time control, he won't be able to match his opponent. The only way to win is to use cunning and flip Dio's ego against him. Araki gets props for making Dio fallible. It would have been too easy to write him as an indestructible force that evades the sunlight as a challenge, not as a threat. Jotaro uses his smarts to prolong his battle with Dio and catches him off guard, railing him with every single punch that he and Star Platinum can muster. At no point in time does he throw more punches than Dio. His time stop isn't for as long and he can't recover like the vampire can, but by using his wits and good old power of friendship, Jotaro is able to put an end to this generational curse and avenge his ancestors' trauma. The arc ends in a very fitting way. Stardust Crusaders is an object of its time, but it also showcases how a writer can utilize the weekly format of manga to slowly develop an epic saga over time. Parts 1 and 2 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure read so much better when you complete Part 3, and it really does reward the reader for sticking with the author throughout the entire ride. Araki discovers who he is as a mangaka, and his art, while busy and hectic throughout Dio's world, shows a refinement of figure and fashion. You can feel the eerie silence of the streets of Cairo as Dio and Jotaro continuously stop time, edging towards one another in an attempt to finally close this loop. You sense Jotaro's desperation as he gets his own stand to slow his heart rate down to a stop, then immediately bring him back to life. You feel yourself drop alongside Jotaro as he's strewn with knives in the sky, but you laugh hysterically when you find out the dude survived the assault by having magazines underneath his shirt. Dio's World is the first arc that culminates Araki's ideas and humor with perfect execution. From here on out, he would improve even further as an artist and writer and would develop JoJo's Bizarre Adventure into something much more than a battle manga. But in 1992, Dio's World was one of the hottest battle shonens at the time and bookmarked an era that valued guts, guys, and glory above all. Dio's World is a Weekly Shonen Jump greatest hit.